Hey yo, welcome to my channel. From the previous video, I showed you how I learned to create a remote controlled watering system to water my plant. To follow the previous video, I decided to deep dive on how to actually access the Raspberry Pi from remote distance outside my home network. I have two routers at home, so the setup is a little bit complicated, but it's the same story. I need to set up port forwarding between the first router, which is talking to the internet directly, and then a port forwarding for the second router and the Raspberry Pi. I've made a step-by-step tutorial so you can just follow along. If you have any questions or any doubts, just pause the video and watch it again. So this is the internet, and you want to access the router and your home system, which is here. This is your home. First of all, you need to reserve the internal IP address for your Raspberry Pi. So after you have reserved the IP for your internal devices, like your like TP-Link router and Raspberry Pi, now let's create a port forwarding. First of all, what is port forwarding? Port forwarding is like you used to living in New York, but now you move to London, and people still write you letters or send you packages. And your neighbor will pick up your letter and packages and send it to your new address in London. So what your neighbor is doing is port forwarding, basically. My first router talks to the internet directly from ISP, and my second router is a TP-Link gaming router, which is where my Raspberry connects. Firstly, I need to give a static IP to the TP-Link, which is my second router. Next step is to set up port forwarding for the first router. Similarly, set up port forwarding between router 2 and my Raspberry Pi. Let's test. What? Sorry, my bad. I entered the wrong IP address. So now it should be working. Oh, yeah. It's working. Now let's connect to the Raspberry Pi. We are in. Let's switch to a network that's outside my home. I'm using my mobile network, the hotspot. We can still use the VNC viewer to access the Raspberry Pi in a graphical user interface. But if you still use the IP address in the port, it's not gonna work. That is because VNC Viewer is using a different port, which is 15900, which is not open to the internet. And perhaps we don't want to open it to the internet anyway. So the thing that I've learned is we can create a secure SSH tunnel and forward the port locally. So in this case, it's 5901 to 5900. Once the tunnel is set up, please don't close it. Keep the window open. And then you can enter in the VNC viewer localhost and the port 591 to connect. Yes, I'm in. Wow. From now on, you can do anything you want. Nice. So we talk about TCP, UDP, routers, port forwarding, etc., etc. It's not that complicated as you heard before, right? With some learnings, you can actually do it as well at home. Before we close today, there's one more thing I want to share with you. Since I have managed to access my Raspberry Pi remotely outside of my home network, so can I turn my Raspberry Pi into a VPN server so that I can access my home network while I'm traveling? Yeah. We'll be using something called Pi VPN to turn your Raspberry into a VPN. Assuming you are now have access to your Raspberry Pi, the first thing that is highly recommended to do is to update your software and packages. If you don't do so, the Pi VPN will ask you to update it anyway. When talk about VPN, security first, right? Reboot your Raspberry Pi and log in again, and now let's start to install Pi VPN. You need to enter your password and then choose all the default options as you go through. I recommend to use WireGuard. It's faster. You can use any ports, but let's keep the default one. Pick whatever DNS provider you want. I chose Cloudflare. For simplicity, we'll just use the public IP address at my home, and you can set up your own DNS entry as well. I also recommend to turn on automatic update to make the system more secure. Reboot, and we're done. Similarly, we need to set up port forwarding. So the TP-Link route first. Remember the port of the VPN server, and also we choose UDP for it. Port forwarding between the TP-Link and the Raspberry Pi. Alright, now let's add a client for the VPN. So let's create one for my MacBook. Okay, you need to find a way to copy the MacBook Pro.config file into your MacBook. Now it sits on the Raspberry Pi, right? So I used a very dumb way just to copy paste the entire text and paste on my MacBook. You can also use SCP or I don't know, other method to do that. Up to you. You can download WireGuard here or from the App Store. I already downloaded it, so let's open it. Let's create a new file by importing the config file or just download from the MacBook. So if you simply click activate, you are connected to the VPN. Make sure you use the network outside of your home. I'm gonna use my mobile hotspot. VPN is connected. So you can use a terminal to ping your IP address. Within the VPN, it's going to be successful. And if you disconnect from the VPN, it's not going to be successful.